Panel number two. So for panel number two, we have Nick Sharma, who is the CEO and founder of Sharma Brands, Dan Moshkevich, the VP of Marketing at ChargeFlow, Jonathan Snow, the CIO of Avenue Z, Ron Shah, the co-founder and CEO of Obvi, and Taylor Holiday, the CEO and founder of Common Thread Collective. Okay, well, I guess we're waiting for another one. We're waiting for Ron. So guys, I would like each of you now to give a little bit of an introduction. It can be about 5 minutes or so, if you'd like, who you are, a little bit of a background bio, and then ultimately, what you'd like to address today. So you guys can just go one to the next. It's fine. Nick, you want to start?
Sure. Nice to meet everybody. I'm Nick Sharma. I'm the Indian guy here on the screen. I'm the founder, CEO of Sharma Brands. We're a growth marketing agency working with different brands, mostly on the consumer side. See, other than that, invest in a bunch of different companies, advise a handful, and just love the world of growth marketing and consumer brands. Excited to be here.
Hey everybody, Jonathan Snow, co-founder of Avenue Z. We're a performance marketing agency that straddles paid media, content and creative, and PR. Excited to talk about kind of the future of commerce. It changes on a daily basis, from tariffs to AI, technology, the future of AI search and how that's impacting e-commerce brands. So excited to dig in with everybody.
Awesome. My name is Dan Moshkevich. I've been in e-commerce, SaaS, in fintech for about 15 plus years now. I'm currently the VP marketing at ChargeFlow. We work with e-commerce merchants to help them eliminate friendly fraud and recover chargebacks, recover lost revenue to chargebacks. Part of my job is to identify market trends, opportunities, kind of steer the ship in the right direction. And I'm based out of Toronto, Canada. So go Leafs. I know playoffs are in full swing. Sorry for all the Florida fans, but still a few games left. In any case, the topics I'll be covering focus primarily on some of the stuff that was touched on in the previous session. So obviously the concerns around the macroeconomic trends like tariffs and kind of economic downturns, and what their impacts on DTC merchants. I'll try to kind of avoid some of the stuff that was already discussed, and also some upcoming trends within the payments industry in specific, around kind of like stable coins and alternative payments. And that's something that those are kind of my key areas of discussion today.
Awesome. I'm Taylor Holiday. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Common Thread Collective, another e-commerce growth agency alongside some of my peers here. Our focus is on helping brands produce predictable, profitable growth. We sort of sit at the overlap of marketing and finance. Our service function sort of begins at FP&A for all of our customers and then helps them through the management of execution against their financial goals as a business. And here today to help jam on all things related to the recent trade policies and impacts to brands, as well as the underlying sort of state of the union for the industry and how this moment in time is particularly precarious for a lot of these brands to try to navigate given the surrounding dynamics. So excited to be here. Thanks for hosting us.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. Okay. Let's kind of hop right into it. So Taylor and John, this one is for you. So what diversification strategies are working best for brands heavily impacted by the recent trade policies?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been on the logistics side of e-commerce for quite some time since I was on the brand side. But I mean, the obvious one is don't be over-reliant on any single country for sourcing your products. Like China, everyone probably heard, it's on pause now, tariffs for 90 days for the reciprocal tariffs for at least, I think it came down 115%, now down to 30% for the US. But diversify your suppliers, don't be over-reliant on any single one. And obviously nearshoring manufacturing is ideal, but it's going to be costly. So think of that. Any type of HS code optimization, if you know, a certain type of other classification would be beneficial for your COGS, take a look at that as well. And also don't over rely on just the US market. Sell to consumers internationally and try to find other markets of expansion so that you're not, you know, all your eggs are in one basket on the supply or the demand side.
Yeah, the challenging problem with this dynamic is that it's so unevenly distributed, the problem, right? If we think about the concentration of this conversation, obviously sits related to China tariffs, which today are now, like John said, down substantially. But the reality is not everybody manufactures all of their products in China. And it also is this question of how much inventory do you presently on hand that determines how acute the problem is for you now. And so what we've noticed across our portfolio of businesses is that the vast majority of people, the actual reasonable solution is nothing, do nothing in the short term, because it is very hard to understand if the investment in diversification of production, which is not an easy undertaking. Like you can't just pick up your supply chain and redistribute it to a bunch of different countries simply, is a worthwhile investment. And even today is another indication that like the actual stable situation that we're going to find ourselves in over the next 6, 9, 12 months is still yet to be discovered. And so much of the behavior that we're seeing from people is relative to how acute the problem is. And that usually relates to, again, if you place the PO, let's say it was pre-Chinese New Year and you were trying to get a bunch of inventory, that is the inventory you're planning to sell in June, and that is subject to tariff now. So the product that you have already in hand is going to be a substantial impact to your COGS. Well, then the strategy to solve that problem is very different than a supply chain problem, right? Which is more about how do I prevent my Q4 inventory from being subject to this problem if you already had a bunch of inventory on hand. So I think the first thing to acknowledge is that like every brand is in a very different position as it relates to this. And certainly like there's this question about how resilient of a, like, are you trying to solve this potential issue in the future, or are you trying to solve it today? Because for many brands, the reality is like that impact is they're going to have to swallow it. They're going to have to absorb it somehow because they can't recreate the supply chain fast enough in order to offset the inventory needs today. And so I think that's like really what we're seeing is that the strategy is really a question of your present balance sheet, how much inventory on hand, what's your cash position, what's your debt position, how much demand do you have, that then determines the corresponding strategy as an outflow of that. But it's so widely disparate in terms of how brands are experiencing this issue.
That's a great point. To follow up on it, for Ron and Nick, so as supply chains are kind of realigning, which international markets do present kind of the greatest opportunity for expansion?
Yeah, I can jump in there. So I think for us, it's been an interesting piece because I think for us, we not knowingly kind of got ahead into international markets last year. We made a big switch from using a tool called Passport to Open Border. And I think what that allowed us to do was it gave us the ability to start looking at markets like Australia, New Zealand, UK, Canada, et cetera, where we're a supplement brand, and where supplements do have a large desire to kind of follow the Western culture. And I think for us to be able to double down in those markets, not only did it make a huge impact on Ash, who is our paid, who is our CMO and runs all our paid media, being able to run better ads. I think for us, we're also able to understand like these are international markets that we kind of put as a back burner and kind of put as like, hey, maybe one day we'll sell to them, to wearing now like it's 30% of our sales. As of literally, the last quarter, 32% of our sales were international. So I think for us, international markets in a holistic manner is a huge opportunity. But in terms of like what have been the lead ones for us, Australia, New Zealand, I feel like although they seem so small and feel like you can probably capture it all in like a month's worth of ad spend, it just feels like it's endless amount of scale and opportunity there. And then followed by UK and Canada have been really big, where we're trying to crack, but we feel like there may be some opportunity, but we haven't been able to, is Mexico. We're trying to figure that piece out. We're tethering between when you're going into international, and I'll close on this point. A lot of people go with this like, oh, do I need to make it like, do I need to switch my ads to make the language barrier, bridge that gap, or do I need to go and make landing pages that are now in Spanish or written in different languages? And someone It's actually John Herman. He's actually the founder of Bureau Brewing, and who's the president of C4. He mentioned one thing to us in a board meeting. He said, if you have to change the language that you're trying to speak to for a potential customer, that's not the customer you want. Look for people who understand the core competency of how you market, which is, let's say it's English. You look for those customers in these different international markets. So that really shaped us to being like, all right, cool. We don't have to try and like do all these personalization, all these different things to like just try and make one market happen. And overnight, we were able to expand into these 4 different markets that have been a large opportunity for us. So that's kind of how we're thinking about it, and it's been pretty interesting for the last 15 months for us.
Nice. Nick, I want you to follow up on that, but I also want you to address maybe the cultural aspect of it, because different cultures, different nationalities have a different way of observing. So it could be the same exact message as Ron was saying, but maybe kind of couched in a slightly different way. What have you seen, Nick, out there?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I've seen a lot of the same stuff Ron was just saying. Ron was spot on. Australia, New Zealand, UK, Canada, Mexico is actually another one that I was thinking as well, which you mentioned, Ron. And then for some of our like brands that are in the larger, maybe 150 million plus, China, Japan, those are also some good markets if you can break in. The tough part is knowing how to approach the market. So, do you go and set up supply chain operations, a 3PL distribution, plug in with distributors? Do you use something like a passport or an open border where you're basically leveraging technology to help the last mile delivery? Or do you figure out a licensing deal where, there's an onshore delivery or a distribution company like in Dubai or Japan, and they take your product in, basically take all the responsibility of sales and marketing. So yeah, all that is, I think, relevant. I think the markets that Ron mentioned are spot on. Ron is obviously a lot much closer to the supply chain and the international side than I am, because I'm on the agency side. Ron's actually running the brand. But yeah, I think those are good spots.
Nice, amazing. So this one's kind of for everyone. So how is the purchase experience changing due to kind of these new global trade agreements?
I'll be happy to take that. So essentially, there's and we're seeing it kind of on the end side of things from the SaaS perspective. There's been a lot of changes with regards to tariffs, and in the last few months, probably a lot of uncertainty in the next few months as well. And it really depends on where the US economy is going to go. If we're going to start seeing a downturn or a recession, that's going to have an impact on how consumers conduct themselves and what kind of purchases they're going to have. But it's also going to cause certain things, certain pressure on the merchants as well. So typically in the past, when there is times of economic pressure, we see 2 specific trends, and I'll cover, obviously chargebacks in specific, but focusing on friendly fraud. So brands, especially DTC ones, start tightening up. They take a hard look at overhead, and they try to kind of rein in that's not considered mission critical, cutting back on like SaaS tools that aren't driving clear ROI. Renegotiating vendor contracts, pulling back on aggressive promotional discounts, and making return policies more strict to protect margins. Consumers, on the other hand, they become more cautious, so they change their spending habits. They start thinking harder before making purchases. And they're more likely to scrutinize the value that they're getting from merchants. And this is important. They're also more likely to act out of financial stress. So if there's uncertainty for them in terms of how much money they're making and their job security, that also has an impact. And that really kind of leads to 2 things. One, we see a spike in friendly fraud. Typically, friendly fraud, just for everyone's knowledge, is when a consumer disputes a legitimate charge with their bank or credit card, not because the card was stolen, but because they personally decided to challenge the transaction. Sometimes it's intentional, like trying to get something for free, but a lot of time it's kind of subtle and situational. Customer might feel that product wasn't worth the price, and start, maybe the return process wasn't, was frustrating, or shipping took too long, and instead of dealing with the merchant, they just file a chargeback because it's now so easy to do that. And during economic slowdowns, we see this behavior tend to spike. So like Visa, I think had a case study recently where they see a 20-30% spike globally in downturn times. And I'm not saying that every consumer turns into that path of friendly fraud, but tolerance levels drop for merchants. So it's essentially something that merchants need to be aware of, that it is, that they need to kind of understand what's happening on a macro scale, and how it will impact them. Essentially just being more proactive, revisiting return refund policies, making sure it's fair and transparent, things like that. And obviously making sure post-purchase communications is clear and consistent. That's key, and that's basically it.
Nice. So I guess we'll have this question for John, but it's also to everybody. So John, I think it was you were talking about Temu, how they changed their ad spend. They kind of dropped it significantly. So, and then maybe they started coming back a little bit. So what would you say, like, which emerging social platforms, especially right now, are delivering the highest ROI for brands that you work with?
Yeah, I mean, regarding to Temu, I don't have their ad spend, but if you take a look at their ad library, I mean, you've seen some pretty stark fluctuations. I had the feeling that, something was in the mix in the past week, ad library being one of them, although de minimis exemption that Temu and Shein leverage has not been impacted by this new update today. With regards to social commerce, really the main two players, it's Meta, right? Instagram and Facebook shops. That is mostly part of the paid media ecosystem. And then you have TikTok shops. TikTok shop is entirely different. I see it as like an upper funnel that had never existed before, because you're going after these affiliate influencers that you don't have to necessarily pay up front. You're only paying them on performance, percentage of the sales that they generate. And you can amplify any organic post with paid media, and the impression and conversion would all happen in TikTok shop. So a lot of brands that I'm familiar with actually have more revenue on TikTok shop than their own Shopify instance, which is pretty staggering. So I think if you're out there and you're the right fit for TikTok shop, I would say AOV under $100, ideally under 50, is probably a good place to start, assuming you have low cost of goods that you could send out at scale to a ton of the TikTok shop affiliates that are out there. There's probably close to 1 million affiliates on TikTok shop right now. And another thing to consider for these larger brands with millions of customers, you have to strategize, how can I activate my existing customers into TikTok shop affiliates post-purchase, so that you don't have to send out free samples, right? And someone purchased your product and they happen to have 1 million followers on TikTok, you should be able to identify that pretty quickly and have that an automated form of communication go out to them to activate.
Amazing. Anybody else got certain platforms that they're seeing really popping? Nope. Nice. Okay.
YouTube shopping has a lot of potential, but YouTube just does not know how to execute on anything related to performance. So they're extremely slow to roll that out right now. And the criteria to onboard as a brand or an affiliate, it pretty much locks out 99% of the potential brands and affiliate influencers that would want to actually use it.
Amazing. Okay, so this also is for the group. So how are you, once again, I want to just let you know, all the questions that we're getting are all AI and tariff based. Like that's it. Nothing else. Nobody cares about anything else in the world. It's all AI and tariff based. So let's, hop in a little bit from your side. So how are you guys implementing AI in your day-to-day operations to kind of drive efficiency, and which AI applications have delivered the most tangible ROI for your business so far? Maybe Taylor?
Yeah, so it's funny. I want to go back to what you just said, because I think all of the frame for these questions flows out of that reality, which is that if we just sort of anchor ourselves for a second in the absolute financial desperation of our industry, like I think this is really important to contextualize that, like these problems, like 145 30% tariffs are just like a non-viable business solution. Like that's not like a, hey, let's just pass the price on to the customer and we'll change the, it's like, no, you don't exist if that happens, right? And even today, it's like, okay, 30%. All right, we're going to absorb 30%. Well, for a lot of categories, like we have a customer that sells like alarm clocks and lamps for kids' bedrooms. They still are absorbing 60% on the electronic side of things, on the lamps. Like this is a massive problem right now as it relates to business viability. And prior to this, we're talking about an industry that as a whole, so Final Loop, I think is an awesome product in our industry that does a great job on the accounting side. I work with them a lot on some aggregate data. And we published this thing in Q1 that basically the median EBITDA for 8-figure stores, and this is like so think of this as already a biased sample of successful e-commerce businesses, is about 6 to 8%. Okay, this is the median EBITDA on basically flat to very little top line revenue growth coming into this year. At that rate, with the current cost of capital, like you can't fund growth. So we have brands that are stuck already. This was before any of this happened as an industry. And so when you think about what are these questions all framed as, they're framed as how do I live and survive? And so I think the AI question is through that lens that what people want is how can I use AI to build better efficiency or reduce costs of my operating structure? And that is like, I think what we see people trying to figure out is where can I create operating leverage to reduce OpEx, to create more efficiency in my workflow. You mentioned, I heard whoever was in the last panel talking about how rather than hiring five new employees, we hired 12 agents. Well, that's just functionally labor leverage that extends your margin profile of your business and allows you to not have to cut back on ad spend, which is really sort of the death knell, the thing that if you turn that down, all of a sudden the revenue starts going and you're on a death spiral. So for us, what we see AI doing is AI offers this opportunity to get more out of your existing labor or to reduce the need for future labor and create operating leverage. And the main power that I see for AI is the omnipresence of it. So if you think about our world, let's just take a very basic task that a media buyer does. Media buyers are on what I call like a circadian human rhythm. They go to sleep, they wake up, they come and check their ad accounts, they make decisions, they eat lunch, then they make decisions. And the point at which they analyze and review things is subject to like very human limitations. Whereas the idea of AI is that it's always looking at the ad account endlessly and forever. And so it doesn't require these breaks or these needs to go off and do other things. And so it can be persistently present in a way that allows it to make perpetually better decisions all the time, communicate endlessly, respond to customers faster, all these things in a way that can be really, really helpful. So I think it's a long-winded way of getting to your question, but I think it's really important to contextualize why is everyone asking about tariffs and AI is because they're desperate. They're desperate for financial relief to the problem that they're facing.
Yeah, I think you're 100% correct. Is anybody else, maybe Nick, have you kind of seen or been utilizing AI in a certain way that's been very positive?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody's been using AI in a lot of the same ways, since it came out with conversational or generative AI. I think some of the cooler stuff I've seen recently has come from, well, I think the cool thing that's going to emerge is AI agents. And I think some of the players and SaaS vendors in this space have been doing a cool job with kind of bringing that to life in a way that's amplified, meaning taking complex technology and just making it easy for, like that one Indian who can't code to actually use. So some of those that I've seen, the triple whale AI stuff is pretty insane. I saw a demo of Highbeam's AI product, and even just being able to, connect all of your data sources in and be able to ask it questions. What's the LTV of a customer who comes in through Instagram versus comes in through Facebook mobile versus, Facebook desktop, for example, or create a recurring agent that scours Reddit, TikTok, and Twitter, watches videos, reads threads, understands what is the sentiment about a certain topic, compares that with data of what did well in the ad account over the last week, and then write me a brief for the creative team to go bang out, 15 to 30 new ads. So things like that I think are going to be really cool. In the next probably 2 to 3 months, I think we're going to see a lot of talk about agents come out, and specifically through the platforms like a Triple Whale or Motion. And then I think in the next 6 months, we're going to see a lot of these become used without the need of a Triple Whale or Motion. Like I think we're going to see people start to build agents on their own. I think SaaS companies will build their own agents. I think brands are going to start thinking about agents as, always on employees who can help with different tasks or admin tasks or recurring tasks that no longer need to be people that are doing it. So yeah, I'm actually really excited one day to see the the marketplace, and especially the secret market. There's going to be a general marketplace, which everybody can use those agents. And then there's going to be the black market marketplaces where all the really good agents are going to be. And so I'm excited to see how that whole world starts to emerge.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can add.
Yeah, please.
Oh, sorry. Just to add one tool too. We've been actually. I don't hear about it too much in the Twitter universe, but there's a company called Pietra, and Ronak Trivedi there. He's actually building something incredible. I think it's probably one of the most insane things I've seen in the D2C space. He's actually building the ability to build the first two-person $100 million D2C brand. And what he's doing is he's creating an agent for literally everything. So AI growth agent, AI CMO, and AI sourcing agent, et cetera. And literally every role that you need, he's asking, and we're baiting it with him, but he's asking about every task that everyone does in every role. And he's basically building that. So he's built one for influencer where literally from seeding to identifying to managing the communication to actually understanding the metrics. He has an agent that can do that entire thing on the back end of Pietra. And what's really cool is they're creating the ability to say like, hey, like if there's so many tasks that are not just repeated, like not just repeating tasks, but like tasks that at some point has just one single outcome. There's probably just quicker ways to think about it through AI, which is I think AI gives you the ability to do that. Which when we did this exercise with him of building our different AI agents, is like sometimes you realize you're adding so many steps and variables that aren't necessary. But we do it because that's just how our workflow has been. So I think they're building something that's really, really cool and something to watch out for. Their sourcing agent, for last point here, which I think could be really cool for everyone, looking at this tariff challenge and thinking about it, is their AI agent, while you're sleeping, can go and reach out to over 500 factories for a certain product, manage the entire conversation based on a tech pack that you give it, which is like, hey, I want this MOQ, this type of product, this type of price point. They'll manage the entire end-to-end conversation with every factory and get it to a point where it's you just have to pay for the sample, or you say yes or no, or certain like qualifying questions afterwards. But think about half the time we can't reach out to 500 different factories because it's 500 different conversations, right? So I think there's a lot of cool things that are going to allow us to get to a point of like creating really, really high levels of optimization, not just being able to have answers to certain things, which I think sometimes that's how like people are using AI right now. But yeah, I think there's a lot of cool things in the works.
I'm curious, what did you guys think about Klarna reversing course on the AI thing? So they were sort of historically the one that like went all in on saying we're not hiring anybody, hiring freeze, AI bots everywhere, and they basically have just reversed course entirely and said we're going back to humans. What did you guys, not, that's a little overstated, but that was generally the theme, is that they're going to hire a bunch of human customer service. The quality was too low. What did you guys think about that?
Yeah, I heard that news. I saw that. I think they kind of overextended in terms of what they wanted to do and where the technology actually is. And I think that's, they started to see poorer results from the agents than they were seeing from humans. And I think what's gonna happen is it's gonna meet somewhere in the middle where it's like a hybrid approach where one human oversees 10 different agents, but there is that element of like human oversight on that regard. I think that's going to be the trend, is using AI as kind of like a force multiplier as opposed to kind of replacing entire departments from the ground up.
One area I think is really interesting is that I think my experience has sort of been the inverse of the human managing agents, and it's more that the agent is the manager. Is that the agent, the capacity to provide like insight as it relates to human issues and challenges and how people work is fascinating. Like if there was a great prompt that Toby Lukey put out, I'll see if I can find it and drop it in the chat here. That was basically like, provide me a self-assessment of your interaction with me. And I had all my leaders do it. And its ability to like provide really thoughtful insight into our behavior as people was like I don't think my wife could have written something that specifically about me in a thoughtful, considerate way about some of my limitations and issues. That was like the kind of thing I would dream of a manager being able to say. And so I think there's actually this interesting area of like the agent overseeing the human work in a way that's, I think, also a pretty interesting sort of flip of the sort of standard expectation of the lowest level work you just sort of outsource to this production function.
Taylor, I think it's pretty amazing that you're saying that. And as I'm thinking about this, I read Think and Grow Rich, I don't know, it was last year or something like that. And I think it was towards the end of the book, Napoleon Hill starts talking about how he created this group of advisors, right? And it was like, I don't know, Abraham Lincoln or like, all these people and people, he's like, no, they weren't real, but I understood their thoughts so well, I kind of advised myself. And one of the ways that I was thinking about with AI right now, you can literally say, make a prompt like, you're Abraham Lincoln, how would you advise me towards XYZ? And you literally can create an entire advisory group to help you kind of move forward with your business or make certain decisions. So this is only the tip of the iceberg, which is really incredible. I wanted to ask just another question. Everybody's all concerned about these tariffs, right? Because like you're addressing a certain market. So which markets should you move to? But what happens when we become dependent on specific platforms? So Carson Ash said, with brands increasingly dependent on platforms like Shopify or Amazon, what should be the contingency plan if a single algorithm tweak or policy change suddenly dries up your primary customer acquisition channel? Anybody can chime in.
Will you say it one more time? Sorry, I was looking something
Yeah,
up while you did it. Sorry.
If
Go
you
ahead.
can reposition the question.
Sure. Just like you're not going to target America only, because what if America changes a policy and all of a sudden your entire business is shut down? What happens if you're using Shopify or you're using Amazon and they do some type of tweak, and now all of a sudden your primary channel is dried up? How are you going to diversify when it comes to, I guess, presenting your products digitally?
So I think that this is actually like a really important question as it relates to how much we as business owners pursue resiliency versus maximum efficiency. And my experience of the e-commerce industry is that like we are wildly concentrated across multiple vectors, and that there is almost like no resiliency. There's one supply chain, one demand channel, one point of transaction in all these cases. And that because diversification often comes at a short-term cost to margin that we don't have. And so I think that this is one of the main problems with our industry is it's so fragile across so many different vectors. And so when iOS 14 happens, it's this monumental issue. If there were to be a big change to Amazon pricing, it's a monumental issue. If Shopify were to experience an issue, it'd be a monumental issue. But I don't know the solution to it, because it would be like a really deep change in the expectation of the horizons in which we're building for. Like if you were building for an 100-year business, I think you would pursue much more diversification for the sake of resilience. But most people, it's such a microwave industry, in that like it all happens so fast that it's very rare that gets built into it. Now, maybe some of this volatility changes our approach to that, but I just haven't seen many. There are some business owners really care about the idea that I'm trying to become anti-fragile versus I'm trying to maximize in every moment, every opportunity in entirety for today.
Nice. I want to just hop back a little bit towards TikTok and subscription brands. So this was an anonymous attendee. So they said, what's the strategy on TikTok for subscription brands, and what percentage of TikTok shop customers move over to the D2C site? And in that case, is the wallet size different? Maybe John or Ron can answer this.
Yeah, coming on from our lens, I think for us, we look at TikTok, at least how we treat it, and maybe we can treat it a little bit more nicely, but definitely a cherry on top. Definitely like we treat it like a stepchild. We don't really want it to have a seat at the table, because I think the customers that come from it, one, I think just whether you look at early LTV or now even 12 months plus LTV, it's not the best. It's definitely a little bit less loyal of a customer base. I think the one piece that is really good is like it's highly attributable, where it's like, hey, if you're going to do XYZ on TikTok, it's going to produce ABC. And so I think from that way, it's kind of money in, money out. But in terms of the customer we're getting, we haven't been able to get behind actually going and saying, hey, we're going to push this as a channel or put money behind this channel or really put a lot of effort into it. And so I think that's one piece. And the second thing to it is just like, I think when it comes to TikTok or even, I mean, you look at something like AppLovin as well, I think there's still a lot of like earliness to the fact that so much of the composition of many of the D2C brands that have been around for 5+ years has been meta first. And I think what we try to do is like a hyper index, or like we try to like quickly figure out a new channel getting embedded into the ecosystem that has been running in a certain circle for a long time. And I think there's a lot of people trying to force fit it and make a methodology work. But I think the reason we have so many inconsistency in some of these things, and I'm not trying to generally speak, but at least for Obvi, is because we've tried that. And I think there's still a lot of time that needs to happen, and time that needs to take into place in terms of some of these channels becoming a core part of it. So that's at least from our lens at Obvi.
John, what do you say?
Yeah, for subscription brands, I don't believe you can offer subscription like rebills within TikTok Shop natively. I think it's in the works. Might be in alpha or beta right now, but it's definitely not broadly available. In terms of converting TikTok Shop customers into your .com customers, there's no real like figure over like what benchmark. It's impossible to cross-reference, who your TikTok Shop customers are. But there are definitely some strategies that brands have been deploying to do that exact thing. So like product inserts into packages with a QR code with some flash sale offer if they scan the code and purchase on your website, things like that. There is a way to get your SMS numbers. You can't market to your TikTok Shop customers, but there is some identifiable information like SMS numbers that would pass through, and you can send them order confirmation emails and ask them to opt into marketing. I know some brands have done that successfully. So it's really about how much you want to go all in on pulling the different levers you can to convert them over to the .com. But I think it would be very wise to do just that.
And I kind of want to follow up on that. I mean, speaking about kind of owning your customer, right? A lot of times people buy through a specific channel. Classically, it's always been like get their email address and now you own them and you can, market to them or whatever it is. Are you seeing any more difficulty trying to, I guess, cross-pollinate, if you will, a certain customer from a certain channel and putting them into another one or owning them through an email list? Was everybody seeing that?
I think the more data, the more first-party, zero-party data you have on your customers, the better off you are in the end, and the more future-proof you are, if a platform does make a change. So I think something that's been top of mind for me is every brand gets email, they get mailing address, they get SMS, right? How do we merge that with their customer's social identity? Do we know what their Instagram handle is, their Twitter handle, their Facebook, so on and so forth? And perhaps some customers prefer to be communicated with Instagram DMs or with WhatsApp, right? But we haven't really bridged that gap yet. And I think it's important to build out a full customer profile on your entire customer base so that you can personalize communication. You can leverage AI to the fullest extent in the future, because the more data you have, the more AI can optimize on.
100%. Dan, this one's for you. So how do you see the landscape of payment fraud, processor regulations, and chargeback management evolving over the next few years?
Yeah, I'll focus on payments. I think that's a big issue. So we were just at Stripe sessions last week in San Francisco, and one of the biggest takeaways that we got from that conference was the Stripe is essentially rolling out support for stable coins using USDC, and just for those who don't know, stable coins are a type of crypto that's pegged to a stable asset, most likely the US dollar. So unlike Bitcoin that fluctuate in value, USDC holds a consistent one-to-one dollar value. And what that gives you is like the benefits of crypto, like instant low fee borderless transfers, without the volatility of the value of the coin. And so that kind of touches on what was discussed earlier with regards to expanding to new territories. It allows merchants to accept payments in places where they normally wouldn't be, in local currency, convert it locally into USDC, and then send it back to the US essentially instantly. So what you get is essentially faster settlements, especially for cross-border transaction, lower processing costs. And Stripe is really going all in on this. So this is something that is coming up in the next few years. Will this go mainstream overnight? Probably not. There's still, quite a lot of barriers, like, consumer education, regulatory stuff, UX challenges, like, copy pasting wallet address and stuff like that. So older audience typically aren't jumping on this, but more, newer, kind of more savvy crypto audiences, Gen Z kind of stuff are more used to this. And as that segment gets bigger, we're going to see a lot more of that expanding in the next couple of years. So I think that's the direction, especially on everything that's cross-border and payments wise.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. This question's for everyone, and maybe we'll start with Nick. So what technological investments are you thinking about prioritizing over the next 12 to 18 months with a focus kind of on customer experience?
Well, I don't want to name like a software stack, but I think in general, a big investment is a lot of companies are basically operating on like rented land, meaning all the software they use, all the data that they have access to, all the cohorts and segments they're building, all the audiences that they have, they're all on platforms that they pay a monthly fee to. None of that is actually data that they sit on and can analyze and operate. That's one of the reasons why I really like, for example, the Triple Whale or the High Beam AI product is you can connect all your pipes in. And you don't have to have a data warehouse. You can just connect them in with like a Fivetran, and then it can go and analyze that data, or you can ask it questions. I think over the next like 12 months, if you are not building your own, if you don't have your own land with your own data on it, and you have the ability to quickly move through it, or create queries to move through it, or agents to move through it, you're going to be severely behind when it comes to being able to make decisions quickly. So I think that's where I would say the investment should be. Outside of that, of course, you want the best tech stack for whatever you're doing, whatever channel you're using to market. You want to make sure your site's fast and all that stuff. But I think, even when I was at Hint 8 years ago, we had our own data warehouse, and we used Looker on top of that to analyze things and build our own reports. And it's just a lot more precise than, just using tools that are out of the box, which are obviously great up until a certain point. But, once you're talking about 8 figures going into 9 figures plus, you really need to have a much better hold on your data.
Nick, I 100% agree with you. I'm consistently having this issue kind of internally with my team, is that I have to ask so many people questions for data. Like, I wish there was literally an internal search engine that I can just ask whatever I want. If I'm asking, give me 3 customers who are similar to this brand in which we're speaking with right now, or can you create a case study based off of the information that we have from this in order to show that we work in a similar market or whatever. I think that would be incredible, and I think that just kind of adds on to what you're saying.
Yeah, I'll say too, I think the part 2 to that, or part 2 and part 3, one is like, in that case, exactly, the more context you can feed in, the better, right? So not just in your example of a case study, it wouldn't just be the data. It would be, okay, how does our CEO speak about the product? How does our CMO envision that the product should be spoken about? How are call recordings being transcripted and digested and uploaded and then analyzed, and then using that data to then speak back to you or write that case study? And then I think the third version of that is also, what are SaaS companies doing to also enable this? how is ChargeFlow going to help me export my data in a way that I can now import it into my data warehouse and get a real complete picture of ChargeFlow's impact on my, in the whole thing. So I think that's also going to be interesting. And I think, hopefully a lot of these SaaS companies make it or allow you to export data in a way that you can do things like that.
100%. Anybody else about technology investments that they're, looking about investing into over the next 12 to 18 months?
I think we're looking at like this AI like ad space, and like I feel like it's some stuff is just too early, but I think in generally speaking, I think like being able to now look and say, hey, like look at this tariff situation, you try to apply that in like where can something like that happen, that's not in the same department, right? Like that's impacting sourcing and logistics. But where can like an event like that, whether you want to call it a black swan event or you look at iOS 14, I think like you look at every department, you say, hey, like what's the worst thing that can happen here? And then like how are you gonna go and have a tool or have ways to protect against that? I think that's kind of how we've been taking some of this, because we didn't get impacted by the tariffs as much as like many other brands, given most of our products are made here, maybe a few ingredients are sourced in China. But it's kind of still interesting to see like, hey, this something else can happen tomorrow that can impact you. So just in general, I think just that mindset, not so much haven't really decided on what tools, because we're currently looking through and finding the right ones.
Yeah, and I guess it's constantly evolving, right? There's always new products, always new services, features that are coming out. So it's important to, I guess, stay on top of it. This question's from Quinn. I got two more because unfortunately we're starting to come to an end, but we're going to do one from Quinn and then one that I want each of you to kind of address. So from Quinn Harper, it says, with consumer wallets tightening, how can organizations meet their growth targets without relying on heavy discounting that could potentially erode brand value?
Change your growth targets. So I'm being a little bit sarcastic with the response, but I think the question that we have to ask is like, in what context was that expectation created, and does the pursuit of it actually meet what this moment is? In many ways, I think like surviving these periods is the lever point that creates the opportunity for the future growth. So that's the first thing, is like, was the expectation created with an understanding of the present context? Is it still viable today? If so, fantastic. But likely you just have to make sure that you've accounted for all of the influx of impact of these issues in where you're going. Because top line growth is obviously very distinct from bottom line growth. And in this moment, I think ensuring that you're not pursuing that growth at an increased risk of death is really, really important. So a little bit of a sarcastic answer, but I think it is important to at least consider the context in which the initial goal was created.
Makes a lot of sense. All right, this question is going to be for everybody, and I would like each of you to answer it. So given today's complex landscape, what single piece of actionable advice would you offer D2C merchants that could make the most significant impact on their business right now? We can start with Nick.
Oh man, right on the spot. Well, I don't know. I think you just have to you have to get very comfortable being agile. You can't just rely on whatever you were doing before. You have to be okay to change. You have to be good with trying things. The brands that I think navigate really any sort of like change, whether it's a tariffs or an ad platform thing, the best is they're just very comfortable pivoting and trying something new. And if that doesn't work, then they pivot and try something new. And they're very good at making calculated bets to test things. So I think, being very comfortable doing that. And I think also just not being romantic about how you used to do things in the past.
That's a great answer. John?
Yeah, I think the thing that's top of mind for me really is focusing on AI search. You have to figure out where your consumers are going, and you have to understand how to meet them there, right? So like ChatGPT, I think they just 2 weeks ago said they hit 1 billion weekly active users, which is insanity. And when you think about what people are using ChatGPT and these other AI chatbots for, it's really research, predominantly researching products, services, problems that they have. And a lot of those queries that people are typing in tie right into potential solution that your brand or business offers, right? So understand how is your brand showing up when people are researching your brand in ChatGPT, almost like branded search. And then also if your brand is showing up when someone is interacting with ChatGPT in the category in which your business lies. So ChatGPT, everyone knows now, Shopify integration. Not only will ChatGPT link out to a website, you can actually check out within ChatGPT. Same thing with Perplexity. Copilot is even working on that too. It's not fully rolled out yet, but these things are probably coming at some point this year. So some brands are going to be able to arbitrage that in itself, just like the early days of organic search on Google. And when you talk to ChatGPT right now, understand, like I said, like, is your brand showing up at all? How visible are you? And there are tools out there that you can type in a ton of different prompts and it'll run sample queries every day for you and give you what your visibility is and what the sentiment around it is. ChatGPT doesn't just complement, every brand that people is asking. There's actually negative sentiment, neutral sentiment. Just got to have visibility there so you don't have any blind spots.
Amazing. It's like the Wild West all over again.
Yep.
All right, Taylor, what do you got?
Yeah, it's a hard question. I think I would ask myself, what unique leverage do I have in building e-commerce? Like when I think about the P&L, we like to break it into 4 categories. You have your CAC, so your marketing efficiency. You have your OPEX, you have your gross margin, you have your profit. Like, so we have a basic principle we call 4-quarter accounting. You can break it into those 4 areas. And if you don't have a way to look at your business and go, I create unique leverage at one of those points in the P&L, it is going to be very, very difficult for you to survive. And I would reconsider how you are going to strategically create unique leverage in one of them. That could be from driving organic demand. So we see a lot of influencer brands have a lot of success because they create leverage in the CAC side of the business. They're not dependent on sort of the Facebook drip of endless attempts at growing paid media. Maybe it's operating leverage. Maybe you're really good at AI. Maybe you can be the people that have a 3-person team get to 20 million in revenue and you create efficiency on the labor profile. Maybe you have American manufacturing, and so you create gross margin edge, and you can have more ability to go out and fund higher dollars of acquisition, so your paid media ROAS can be lower and grow the business. But if you don't have one of those, where there is a distinct leverage across the P&L somewhere, this game is remarkably difficult. And so I would look through my strategic sort of growth of why is this business going to matter in the world? And if I can't point to an obvious and distinct unique value proposition, I would think about what I'm going to do strategically to try and create one, because otherwise it is just really hard to win this game.
Awesome. Dan?
Yeah, just to kind of follow up on what Taylor said, I think addressing revenue leaks and managing kind of efficiency across the business. So understanding regarding if you're paying too much for a specific SaaS or that you're not really using, and looking at your tech stack and renegotiating those contracts to be a little bit more favorable to your end. I think that's going to be important, and we're already kind of starting to see that across the SaaS ecosystem. Obviously everything around fraud and chargeback recovery, that's a given. You want to obviously mitigate that as much as possible and recover as much revenue from friendly fraud. And just kind of being operationally lean and efficient just to kind of weather this out until kind of everything on the macro level stabilizes, and then you'll come out of that in a much better shape. You'll be a lot more efficient and able to run at a much more effective way, and I think that's critical. And businesses should be doing this regularly, but I think now, given the conditions, kind of being forced to do this, and so this also applies to how you run your marketing, your ops, your customer success, and understanding where the pain points are there and addressing those. So that's basically it.
Great point. And finally, Ron?
Yeah, I mean, tough to go last, 'cause I think every single one of you guys made great points. I think my thing is really think outside of where else your consumer shops, or where else your consumer can be. I think for us that was the answer was international, and I think we doubled down, found a way to get really tactical and saying, hey, how can we do this in the most quickest format? Not everything needs to be, hire this agency for that, or, go and get X amount of SaaS tools and go. I don't think everything has to be extremely complicated or costly. I think you can test very quickly. It's okay if you fail fast. Just try new things quickly. I think there's a lot of also equal amounts of noise out there, but you won't know what's noise for you until you try it. So I think just test more than ever.
Awesome. Amazing. Thank you guys for all those answers. I want to thank you to the second panel. You all were absolutely incredible. I truly personally enjoyed this conversation, and I hope the audience out there did as well. So now is the time for the big moment. So without further ado, I'd like to announce the winner of the MetaQuest VR headset. And the winner is Christina Garcia. Christina Garcia, congratulations. You're going to be hanging out in the Digiverse. Let us all know how that goes. Our team will be in contact with you. So just pay attention to your inbox, and it will be there. Look, thank you, everybody, for number one, biggest thank you to the panelists for taking your time to contribute your brilliant ideas, and thank you for representing your amazing brands. You really made this webinar a smashing success. I also have to thank everyone here at ChargeFlow for putting on another incredible webinar. It's not easy. I know it seems like it, but it takes a lot of work, and I really appreciate everybody on my team. And if you want to forget about chargebacks and win more disputes than ever before, please feel free to reach us at chargeflow.io. We'd love to speak with you. And of course, most importantly, thank you for watching, for listening. I really hope it was beneficial and deeply informative. So until next time, all the best.